Don't. Someone might see. But the mountain man did it anyway to the fat girl. Clara had never been to a place like this before. The mountain town felt quiet, almost like it existed outside of time. The air smelled of pine and wet soil, a sharp freshness she hadn't experienced in the city. She had come here for the summer, hoping to get away from the constant teasing she faced back home. People had always whispered behind her back, calling her names that stuck like sticky mud, and Clara was tired of hearing them. Maybe, she thought, the mountains could give her a fresh start. She walked down the narrow dirt path from the small bus stop at the edge of town, dragging her worn suitcase behind her. Every sound seemed louder here, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, even the distant call of a crow. She felt both nervous and excited, a mixture she didn't fully understand. This was new. This was different. And most importantly, this was far away from the people who made her feel invisible. The town was smaller than she expected. A few wooden houses lined the street, their paint faded from years of sun and wind. A general store with a creaking sign welcomed the occasional passerby. Clara noticed that everyone seemed to know each other. People waved as they passed, exchanged small smiles, and stopped to chat. It made her feel like an outsider, even though she wanted desperately to belong. Her new home for the summer was a modest cabin on the outskirts of town, perched at the edge of a thick forest. The cabin looked almost like it had grown out of the mountain itself, made of rough wooden logs and a steep roof covered in moss. Clara dropped her suitcase at the doorstep, took a deep breath, and opened the door. The inside smelled faintly of wood and something earthy, comforting in a way she didn't expect. Sunlight streamed through a single window, casting golden patterns on the wooden floor. After unpacking her few belongings, Clara decided to explore the area. She wandered down a trail behind the cabin that led into the forest. Every step she took seemed to sink her deeper into a different world, one where no one judged her for her appearance, where she could just be herself. Birds flitted from branch to branch, squirrels chattered as they ran up tree trunks, and the breeze whispered through the leaves. Clara smiled for the first time in what felt like months. It was on this trail that she first saw him. He was standing by a small stream, tall and broad-shouldered, with hair the color of dark chestnuts and a beard that made him look older than he probably was. His clothes were simple and practical, patched in places, and he seemed completely at ease in the wilderness. Clara stopped in her tracks, unsure whether to turn back or keep walking. She had heard stories from the locals about the mountain man, how he lived alone in the forest and rarely spoke to anyone. People said he was gruff, even dangerous, though no one seemed to know much beyond rumors. He noticed her immediately, his sharp eyes studying her with curiosity. For a moment she felt exposed, as if he could see every insecurity she had tried to hide all her life. She felt the familiar twinge of self-consciousness, her shoulders hunching slightly. But instead of fear, there was also intrigue. She had never met anyone like him. "Hello," she said quietly, her voice trembling just a little. He nodded but didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone seemed to fill the space around them, like the forest itself had taken a form and was standing there in front of her. Clara felt a strange mix of nervousness and fascination. She didn't know what to say next, so she just stood there, watching the water ripple over smooth stones. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke, his voice low but not unkind.
"You're not from here."
No, Clara admitted, her voice steadier now. I'm here for the summer." She swallowed hard, unsure why she felt the need to explain herself to a stranger. "Summer?" he said, almost to himself, and then nodded. Makes sense. Not many people come here just to look at the trees. Clara laughed softly, surprised at the small joke. It felt like an icebreaker. Yeah, I guess most people come for the quiet, she said. Or maybe to get away from something. She didn't say what she was running from, though, her mind immediately filled with all the cruel words and sneers she had endured. He looked at her differently then, like he understood without needing details. You'll find it here, he said simply. Quiet, I mean. You'll get used to it. Clara nodded, feeling a strange comfort in his words. There was a certain honesty about him, a lack of pretense that made her feel safe, even though the stories had made him seem unapproachable. Right now, he was just a person, a real person, standing by a stream in a world away from the judgment of others. Over the next few days, Clara saw him more often. Sometimes he would be cutting wood near his cabin. Other times he would appear along the trail, moving with a quiet confidence through the forest. Each time, she felt a little less nervous, a little more willing to engage. They exchanged small greetings at first, simple words that eventually grew into short conversations about the forest, the weather, and the small town she was slowly getting to know. Clara began to realize that there was something magnetic about him, not the kind that made her heart race with fear, but the kind that made her want to see the world differently, to notice details she had always overlooked. She watched the way he moved, the way he seemed to understand the land like it was part of him. It made her want to be better, to notice more, to live more fully in the present. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and painted the sky with shades of pink and orange, Clara found herself sitting by the stream again. The water reflected the colors above, creating a peaceful mirror that made everything feel softer, more manageable. The mountain man was there too, sitting a few feet away, quietly whittling a piece of wood. "You're here again," he said, without looking up.
"I like it here," Clara replied. "It's
peaceful, different." He glanced at her then, a small smile breaking the serious lines of his face. "Good," he said simply. "What? Silver? Earphone? You need that sometimes?" Clara nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had needed it more than she realized. The mountains weren't just a place. They were a chance to escape the noise of the world, the cruel words, the judgments, a chance to find herself in a place that didn't demand perfection. As night fell and the first stars appeared, Clara knew she was at the beginning of something she couldn't quite name. She didn't know what the future held, and she didn't know what kind of person the mountain man really was. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged somewhere. And as the forest settled into quiet darkness, she realized that sometimes the most unexpected people could make the greatest difference in your life. Clara woke early the next morning, the soft light of dawn spilling across her small cabin. She could hear birds chirping in the trees and the faint rustle of leaves from a gentle breeze. The mountains were alive, yet calm, as if the world outside her little forested corner didn't exist. She dressed quickly and grabbed a small backpack, deciding to explore the forest a little more before the sun got too high. She had noticed a narrow path yesterday hidden behind thick bushes that seemed to lead deeper into the woods. Curiosity pulled her forward. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the smell of pine and earth. Clara walked slowly, listening to the sounds of the forest. Every step felt like an adventure. She passed a fallen tree covered in moss, watched a squirrel hop from branch to branch, and saw tiny wildflowers peeking through the undergrowth. Each little detail made her feel alive in a way the noisy city never had. After walking for a while, she reached a small clearing with a pond. The water was still, reflecting the trees and sky like glass. Clara paused, kneeling to touch the cool water with her fingers. The silence was almost complete, broken only by the occasional splash of a fish or the distant call of a bird. She smiled to herself. This was a place of peace, a place where she could breathe without the weight of judgment or ridicule. She wasn't alone for long. From behind a line of trees, a shadow moved. She stiffened at first, but then recognized the familiar figure of Elias, the mountain man. He carried a bundle of firewood in his arms and moved with quiet confidence. Clara waved and he nodded, placing the wood down beside the pond. "You're early," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I wanted to explore," Clara replied, brushing leaves from her sleeves. "This place, it's beautiful." Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the edge of the pond and squatted, staring at the water. "It's easy to forget how quiet the world can be," he said after a moment. "Most people are too busy making noise to notice it." Clara nodded, understanding what he meant. In the city, life had always been loud. People talking over each other, cars honking, constant reminders that she didn't fit in. Here, in the mountains, she could finally hear herself think. She realized that for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the usual pressure to be anyone other than herself. They sat together in silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't feel awkward. Clara watched as Elias carefully arranged the firewood, noticing how methodical he was in his movements. He seemed connected to the forest in a way she couldn't explain, like he belonged here more than anywhere else. She felt a strange admiration for him, mixed with curiosity. "I didn't know people lived like this," Clara said finally, breaking the quiet. "I mean, in the forest, away from everything." Elias looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. "Not many do. Most people need the city, the noise, the comfort of other humans. I like it here. I like being alone." Clara nodded slowly, sensing that there was more to his words than he was saying. "It must be lonely sometimes," she said gently. "Lonely can be good," he replied after a pause. "It gives you time to think, to understand yourself. Most people never do that." Clara thought about that. She had spent so much time trying to fit in, trying to change herself to make others happy. Here, for the first time, she could think without worrying about what others thought. She realized she wanted to understand herself more too. Over the next few days, Clara and Elias spent more time together. Sometimes they walked along the trails, talking about small things, the shapes of the clouds, the sounds of the forest, the way the light changed through the day. Other times they simply sat in silence, letting the peace of the mountains wash over them. Each interaction brought a little more trust, a little more understanding. Clara found herself laughing more, feeling lighter than she had in years. One afternoon, Elias suggested they collect berries from a nearby bush. Clara hesitated at first, unsure if she would be able to keep up, but Elias's calm encouragement made her try. They worked together, picking bright red berries, laughing when some fell into the dirt or when a bee buzzed too close. Clara felt a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time, a simple happiness that didn't rely on anyone else's approval. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they sat on a fallen log, their hands sticky from the berries. Clara glanced at Elias and noticed something in his expression, a softness she hadn't seen before. It made her heart flutter, though she didn't fully understand why. "You're different from anyone I've met?" Clara said quietly, almost afraid to speak. Elias looked at her, studying her face, and then nodded.
"And you're different too?"
"Most people don't stop to notice things, or to listen. You do." Clara felt a strange connection in that moment, as if he understood parts of her she hadn't even admitted to herself. She realized that their friendship, if it could even be called that, was unlike anything she had known. It wasn't just about being alone in the forest. It was about finding someone who saw her, really saw her, without judgment. Days turned into weeks, and Clara grew more comfortable in the mountains. She explored further, learned more about the plants and animals, and began to feel like a part of the forest herself. Elias was always nearby, not controlling, not intrusive, but quietly present. She began to rely on his knowledge and guidance, not out of necessity, but because she trusted him. One evening, as they sat by the stream watching the stars appear, Clara felt the need to express something she had been holding inside. I'm glad I came here, she said softly. I didn't know what I needed, but now I do. All of this, it's helping me see things differently. Elias nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Sometimes the world has a way of showing you what you need, even when you don't realize it. You just have to notice it. Clara watched the reflection of the stars in the water and felt a peace she had never known. For the first time, she didn't worry about how she looked or what others thought. She realized that the mountains and this mysterious mountain man were giving her more than just a summer away. They were giving her a chance to discover herself. And though she didn't yet know what the coming days would bring, she felt ready to face challenges, ready to grow, and ready to trust that life could be beautiful, even when it was uncertain. The bond between them was quietly growing, built on shared moments, trust, and the simple understanding that sometimes the most important connections are the ones that happen far away from the world's eyes. Clara didn't know how long the summer would last or what would happen before it ended. But for now, she felt safe, seen, and alive in a way she had never felt before, and that was enough to keep her heart open to whatever lay ahead. Clara woke that morning to the soft golden light spilling through the cabin window. The mountains were quiet, peaceful, and full of promise. Yet today felt different. There was a strange sense of anticipation in the air, one she couldn't quite place. Maybe it was because she had been spending more time with Elias, the mountain man, and their connection had begun to feel personal. Not romantic exactly, but something important. Something deeper than she had ever experienced with anyone before. She dressed quickly, pulling on her worn boots and a comfortable sweater, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. A gentle breeze brushed her hair, and she felt awake in a way she hadn't in years. Today, she decided she would explore a new trail she had spotted the previous day, a narrow path winding up the side of the mountain. As she walked, the forest seemed to welcome her. Birds sang softly, and sunlight filtered through the trees in golden streaks. Clara felt a sense of freedom here, like she could leave all her worries behind. But the thought of Elias lingered in her mind. He was always nearby these days, sometimes a few steps ahead, sometimes quietly watching her from a distance. She wondered what he thought of her. Whether he saw her the way she was beginning to see him, steady, reliable, a part of the mountains themselves. Soon she heard the familiar sound of someone moving through the underbrush. She paused, and there he was, Elias, carrying a small bundle of freshly cut firewood. He stopped when he saw her, giving a small, almost shy nod. Clara waved, and he returned it with a quiet smile. There was something in his presence that made her heart race, not with fear, but with curiosity and trust. "Good morning," Clara said, her voice soft but cheerful. "Morning?" Elias replied, setting the bundle of wood down near a large rock. "You're out early again." "I wanted to see the mountain from a higher trail," Clara said. "I think the view will be amazing." Elias studied her for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. "It is a good trail," he said. "Steeper than the others, though. You'll have to be careful." "I can handle it," Clara said, smiling. "Besides, I have you to guide me if I need help." He raised an eyebrow, not with amusement, but with something softer. Acknowledgement, maybe even approval. "We'll see about that," he said, his tone calm. Together they walked along the trail. The path twisted through dense trees and over rocks, sometimes requiring careful steps. Clara noticed how comfortable Elias was moving over uneven ground. He seemed part of the mountain itself, moving with ease and grace. She felt safe with him nearby, even when the path became tricky or steep. As they reached a small clearing halfway up the mountain, Clara paused to catch her breath. The view was already beautiful. Rolling hills covered in green with patches of wildflowers swaying in the breeze, and a distant river glinting like silver. She turned to Elias, who stood silently beside her watching the view. "You've been here long?" she asked, curiosity overcoming her shyness. He shrugged lightly. "Long enough," he said. "The mountains teach you patience." "Time feels different here," Clara nodded, understanding. In the city, life had always been rushed, crowded, noisy. Here it moved differently. She felt calmer, more aware, more alive, and she realized that spending time with Elias made it even more meaningful. His quiet presence was comforting, almost grounding, and she found herself wanting to share small moments with him, even if she didn't yet know how to express it. They continued up the trail, talking occasionally about the trees, the sounds of the forest, and the changing weather. Clara laughed more than she had in months, enjoying the simplicity of the conversation and the feeling of being understood without judgment. Every step seemed to bring them closer, not just physically, but in a quiet, emotional way she couldn't explain. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light across the forest, they reached the top of the trail. Clara gasped at the view. The mountains stretched endlessly in every direction, layered in shades of green and blue, with the river weaving through the valleys like a silver ribbon. She felt a rush of excitement, a sense of accomplishment, and a deep, peaceful happiness. Elias stood beside her, silent and calm, watching her reaction. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said finally. Clara nodded, unable to speak at first. "It's amazing," she said, her voice soft. "I never imagined it would look like this." He smiled slightly, just enough to soften his usual serious expression. "I come here often. It reminds me why the mountains are worth living for." Clara turned to him, noticing the small lines around his eyes, the way he seemed to belong here. "You really love it here," she said. "I do," he said simply. "It's peaceful, and it teaches you things about yourself you can't learn anywhere else." She thought about that, realizing he was right. The mountains were teaching her too, lessons about patience, observation, and understanding. And through it all, Elias was a teacher in his own quiet way. They sat on a flat rock at the edge of the clearing, their legs dangling over the side. Clara noticed the warmth of the sun on her skin and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. She felt a closeness to Elias that was comforting, but also a little thrilling. It was the kind of closeness that made her feel safe, yet aware that their bond was growing stronger. After a few moments she hesitated, then spoke. I'm glad you're here," she said softly. "I mean, not just in the mountains, but here, with me." Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I'm glad too," he said quietly. "It's better when you're not alone, even for someone like me." Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of relief and happiness. She realized that for the first time in a long time, She didn't feel the need to hide parts of herself. With Elias, she could simply be Clara, the girl who had struggled, who had felt invisible, who now felt seen. As the afternoon passed, they explored the clearing, looking for wildflowers and observing birds. They laughed when a small rabbit hopped too close, startling them both. Clara felt her worries slip further away, replaced by a sense of joy she hadn't experienced in years. Every moment with Elias seemed to hold a quiet magic, something she didn't want to end. But as the sun began to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the trees, Clara felt a twinge of uncertainty. Their bond was growing stronger, and she realized that her trust in him was also deepening. She wasn't afraid, exactly, but there was a tension she couldn't ignore, a sense that their closeness might cross boundaries she hadn't fully considered. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she didn't need to rush anything. The mountains had taught her patience, and she would follow that lesson now. Still, she couldn't deny the small thrill that came with being near Elias, the quiet awareness that their connection was special, unusual, and important. They began the walk back to the cabin, the forest bathed in golden evening light. Clara noticed how the shadows stretched across the path, how the air smelled richer and cooler now. Elias moved quietly beside her, and for the first time she realized that she didn't just feel safe with him. She felt understood, valued, and quietly admired in ways that words couldn't fully capture. When they reached the cabin, Clara turned to Elias, wanting to say something more but unsure what words could convey. He nodded, as if sensing her thoughts, and offered a small smile. That smile, simple yet meaningful, left her with a feeling she couldn't quite describe, something between comfort, admiration, and anticipation. As night fell, Clara sat by the window, looking out at the mountains in the moonlight. She thought about the day, about the trail, about Elias, and about the strange mix of emotions stirring in her chest. She realized that the summer was shaping her in ways she hadn't expected, teaching her about trust, closeness, and the quiet power of human connection. And though she didn't know what tomorrow would bring, she felt ready to face it, with the mountains, with Elias, and with herself. She knew their bond was growing, quietly but undeniably, and that something important was beginning, something that would change her, and maybe even him, in ways they could not yet imagine. Clara woke to a chill in the cabin, the early morning sunlight barely touching the wooden floor. The mountains were quieter than usual, as if holding their breath. She felt a strange mix of excitement and unease. Lately, the days with Elias had been full of laughter, comfort, and quiet understanding, but now she sensed that something was shifting. She dressed quickly and stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet soil and pine. The mountains stretched endlessly around her, serene yet intimidating. She noticed Elias already working nearby, gathering kindling for the fire. He moved with the calm, steady rhythm she had come to admire, his presence grounding her even when she felt unsure. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," he replied without looking up, stacking the wood with precise movements. There was a quiet intensity in his eyes that Clara had never noticed before. Something about him today felt heavier, more serious. "I was thinking of exploring the northern trail today," she said, trying to sound casual. "I heard there's a small waterfall, and it looks beautiful." He paused, studying her for a moment before responding. "It's not far, but the path is steep and rocky," he said.
"You'll need to be careful." "I can manage," she said, her voice steady. But inside, a small voice whispered that she was nervous.
She wasn't afraid of the trail itself, but of what this day might bring. Their bond had grown stronger with each passing week, and with that closeness came feelings she didn't yet understand. Feelings of trust, admiration, and a strange vulnerability. Together they set off toward the northern trail. The forest seemed denser here, the sunlight filtering through thick branches and casting intricate patterns on the ground. Clara noticed the subtle sounds of life all around her, the distant call of a bird, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, the soft trickle of a stream hidden among the trees. Each sound made her feel alive, and yet aware that she was completely visible in this wild open space. Elias walked beside her silently for much of the trail, occasionally glancing at her with a quiet attentiveness that made her heart flutter. Clara realized she was noticing everything about him, the way his hands moved as he balanced himself on the rocks, the small furrow of concentration between his eyebrows, the calm steadiness of his breathing. She couldn't explain why, but being near him made her feel safe and yet excited at the same time. When they reached the waterfall, Clara's breath caught. The water tumbled over rocks into a small pool, sparkling in the sunlight. Mist rose gently, pooling her skin and leaving tiny droplets on her hair. She took a step closer, mesmerized by the scene.
"It's beautiful," she whispered.
Elias stood a few steps behind, watching her carefully. "It is," he said quietly, "but it's easy to slip near the edge. Be careful." Clara nodded, careful not to get too close, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the water. There was something freeing about this place, a sense of wonder that made her forget the worries she carried with her in the city. And yet, she couldn't ignore the tension that had been growing between her and Elias. After a few moments of silence, she turned to him. "I'm glad you're here," she said softly. "I don't think I could have found this place on my own." He looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I'm glad you came," he said. "It's easier to see the mountains through someone else's eyes sometimes." Clara felt a warmth in her chest at his words, but it was accompanied by a flicker of unease. Their closeness had grown, and she realized that trust and comfort could sometimes make people vulnerable. She wondered if Elias felt the same tension, the same complicated feelings, though he rarely showed them. As they explored the area around the waterfall, Clara slipped on a mossy rock. She yelped and tried to steady herself, but her foot gave way. Elias reacted instantly, grabbing her hand and pulling her to solid ground. "Careful," he said, his voice tense but not angry. "You could have fallen." "I'm fine," Clara said quickly, her face flushed from both embarrassment and adrenaline. "Thank you." He didn't let go immediately, his hand steadying her. She noticed the strength in his grip, the way he seemed completely aware of every movement. For a moment, she didn't move, caught between the thrill of the close contact and the strange tension in the air. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "Yes," she said again, smiling softly. But she realized that something had shifted. That small moment had created a new awareness between them, a quiet understanding that their trust was growing into something deeper. They continued to explore, carefully moving along the rocks near the water. Clara felt her heart race with every step, aware of the closeness between them. She wanted to say something, to acknowledge the connection they were building, but the words stuck in her throat. She wasn't ready, and perhaps neither was he. When the sun began to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the forest, they sat on a large boulder near the edge of the waterfall. The mist cooled their skin, and the sound of the rushing water filled the space between them. Clara felt a strange mix of comfort and excitement, a feeling she hadn't experienced before. "I've never felt this calm anywhere else," she said quietly. "Not in the city, not with anyone, but here I feel different, lighter." Elias looked at her, his gaze softening. "The mountains have a way of doing that," he said. "They make you see what's important and what's not." Clara nodded, thinking about all the worries she had carried before coming here. The judgment, the teasing, the constant pressure to be someone she wasn't. None of that mattered here. And none of it mattered with Elias. As the evening grew darker, Clara realized that the quiet tension between them was growing too. Their hands brushed briefly as they adjusted their positions on the rock. The touch was accidental, but it lingered in her mind. She felt a rush of warmth, a flutter of nerves, and a strange awareness of how much she trusted him. Elias noticed the change too, though he didn't speak of it. Instead, he remained near her, a steady presence in the fading light. Clara felt safe, yet aware that their bond was now deeper, more complicated than before. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was trust, closeness, and a quiet, unspoken understanding. They began the walk back to the cabin, the forest bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Clara's thoughts wandered, replaying the day's events. The waterfall, the brush of hands, and the calm presence of Elias. She realized that this summer was teaching her more than she had expected, not just about the mountains but about herself, about trust, and about letting someone in. By the time they reached the cabin, the stars were beginning to appear, tiny points of light scattered across the sky. Clara paused, looking up, and felt a sense of peace wash over her. The mountains, Elias, and this summer had changed her. She wasn't the same girl who had arrived weeks ago, unsure and self-conscious. She was stronger, braver, and more aware of the value of human connection. Elias stood beside her quietly, and for a moment they just watched the stars together. There were no words, only understanding. Clara knew that challenges might come, that their bond might be tested in ways they didn't yet anticipate, but for now she felt a quiet certainty that this trust, this closeness, was worth everything. And as she went inside the cabin, preparing for the night, Clara carried with her the awareness that some moments, like today, were rare and precious. The mountains had given her clarity, Elias had given her trust, and together they had shared something that would linger in her memory long after the summer ended. The summer air had grown warmer over the weeks, but Clara could feel a change in the mountains. The mornings were crisp, with a faint chill that hinted at the coming fall, and the evenings were quieter, as if the forest itself knew the season was shifting. Clara woke early again, as she had done all summer, but today her thoughts felt heavier than usual. This was the last week she would spend in the mountain town, the last week with the quiet forests, the small trails, and with Elias. She dressed slowly, pulling on her sweater and boots, and stepped outside. The mountains stretched before her, golden and green in the soft morning light. Birds chirped softly and the wind whispered through the pines. Clara felt a tug in her heart. She loved this place, and she didn't want to leave. But she also knew that the lessons she had learned here, the strength she had found, would stay with her long after the summer ended. Elias was already outside, chopping wood near the cabin. His movements were calm, steady, and familiar. Clara watched him for a moment, feeling a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt before. Their time together had changed her. She was no longer the nervous, self-conscious girl who had arrived weeks ago. The mountains had taught her patience, observation, and self-respect. Elias had taught her trust, understanding, and quiet courage. Together, they had shared moments that felt rare and precious, moments that Clara knew she would carry with her forever. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," Elias replied, nodding. There was a calmness in his voice that seemed to match the morning itself, steady and reassuring. I was thinking of walking to the waterfall one last time, Clara said, trying to keep her voice casual, though her heart raced. I want to remember it, the way it looked, the way it sounded. We can go, he said. It's a good place to remember. They set off together, walking along the familiar trails. The forest seemed brighter today, as if the mountains themselves were celebrating the last days of summer. Clara noticed every detail, the patterns of sunlight through the trees, the small flowers along the path, the gentle ripple of a stream. She felt connected to the mountains, to the forest, and to Elias in a way that went deeper than words. When they reached the waterfall, Clara paused, taking in the view. The water tumbled over the rocks into the pool below, sparkling in the morning sun. Mist rose gently from the surface, cooling her skin and leaving tiny droplets in her hair. She felt a sense of wonder, awe, and gratitude all at once. It hasn't changed a bit, she whispered, smiling. Elias stood beside her, silent, watching the water. Some things stay the same, even when everything else changes, he said quietly. It's important to remember them. Clara nodded, thinking of the summer as a whole. The laughter, the long walks, the quiet moments, the trust they had built. She realized that while the mountains and the waterfall would stay the same, her life outside this town would continue to change. But the lessons she had learned and the bond she had shared with Elias would stay with her forever. They spent the day exploring the area around the waterfall, walking along the rocks and observing the birds and small animals. Clara felt a deep sense of peace. She was no longer afraid of being herself. She was no longer worried about how others had judged her in the past. The mountains and Elias had given her confidence, strength, and clarity. As the afternoon sun began to dip, casting long shadows over the forest, Clara and Elias sat on a large rock near the edge of the water. They watched the sunlight dance on the rippling surface, feeling the cool mist on their skin. For a long while, they didn't speak. There was no need. The silence was comfortable, full of understanding and reflection. Finally, Clara broke the quiet.
I can't believe how much I've changed this summer, she said softly.
I feel different.
Stronger, braver, and it's because of this place and because of you. Elias looked at her, his expression gentle. You've always had that strength, he said quietly. The mountains just gave you a chance to see it for yourself. Clara smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude. I think I needed that chance, she said. I think I needed to find someone I could trust, someone who wouldn't judge me.
You've found that, Elias said, his voice calm but steady. And you've given me the same.
Trust, friendship, someone who sees me for who I am. They sat together, watching the water flow, the quiet understanding between them deepening. Clara realized that while their summer together was ending, the connection they had built was not limited to time or place. It was something that would stay with her, a part of her that would guide her in the months and years to come. As the sun set behind the mountains, Clara felt a mixture of sadness and hope. She would miss the trails, the waterfall, the quiet mornings, and the presence of Elias. But she also felt ready to return to her life outside the forest, stronger and more confident than she had ever been. She had learned that trust and understanding could be rare and precious, and that moments of connection could change a person forever. When they returned to the cabin, Clara began packing her things, her movements slow and deliberate. Each item she placed in her suitcase felt like a small piece of memory she would take with her. Elias helped where he could, moving quietly and efficiently, and Clara noticed the care in his actions. He wasn't just helping her pack. He was helping her carry the weight of her experiences, the lessons she had learned, and the memories she had made. Once everything was packed, they stood outside the cabin, the mountains glowing softly in the evening light. Clara felt a lump in her throat, realizing that their time together was truly ending. "I'm going to miss this place," she said quietly. "And I'm going to miss you." Elias nodded, a small smile on his lips. "And I'll miss you," he said. "But you're taking something with you. Something that can't be left behind. The strength you found, the confidence, and the lessons of the mountains." Clara felt a warmth in her chest at his words. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Elias looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Take care of yourself," he said. "And remember, the mountains are always here if you need them. And so am I, in a way." Clara smiled, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. She hugged him briefly, a gesture full of trust, respect, and gratitude. Then she turned toward the path that would lead her back to the bus stop, back to the life she had left behind for the summer. As she walked away, she glanced back one last time. Elias stood by the cabin, his figure calm and steady against the mountains. She realized that this summer had changed her in ways she could never have imagined. She had discovered her own strength, learned to trust, and experienced a bond that was rare and meaningful. By the time the bus arrived to take her back to the city, Clara felt a sense of peace. The mountains had taught her patience, self-respect, and courage. Elias had shown her trust, understanding, and quiet companionship. And together, they had shared moments that would stay with her forever. As the bus pulled away, Clara looked out the window at the forest, the trails, the waterfall, and the mountains stretching endlessly into the horizon. She smiled softly, knowing that while the summer had ended, the lessons, memories, and growth she had experienced would continue to guide her in life. And in her heart, she carried a quiet certainty that the trust, the understanding, and the connection she had found in the mountains would stay with her forever, a reminder that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones that teach us who we truly are. The mountains faded in the distance, but the warmth of that summer and the presence of the mountain man remained with her, a gentle force shaping her future and reminding her that life, no matter how complicated, could also be full of wonder, trust, and quiet beauty.